For this year's meeting, in lieu of speakers' gifts, CAP is pleased to providing a donation to STARS in recognition of all of their amazing work they do to save lives in our province. So here we come to our first agenda item today. I'd like to invite Andrea Faubert to the stage from Corteva Agri-Science, sponsor for our first panel, View from the Hill. Andrea is the Director of Government and Industry Relations for Corteva in Canada. Her role, Andrea leads policy development supporting Corteva seed and crop production business units, as well as Corteva's network of domestic manufacturing and R&D facilities. Andrea has a decade of experience working with federal and provincial governments. Most recently, Andrea served as the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations for Ontario's Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Andrea is native of Chatham, Ontario, home of one of Corteva's largest facilities in Canada, and returns often there to her family's vegetable farm in the region. I'd like to welcome Andrea.
Good morning, everyone. As Jill introduced, I'm Andrea Faubert, and I lead Government and Industry Affairs with Corteva Agri-Science. Corteva is built on about a 200-plus year history of Dow Agri-Science and DuPont Pioneer, but we're really celebrating our 5th year as a business and the world's largest pure-play ag company this year, coming in June of 2024. You will know us as your hopefully one of your seed and crop protection providers of choice. We are an innovator company and investing about $1.2 billion a year in research and development in order to bring you the best seed and crop protection products that you need to protect and grow the best possible crop that you can every single year. For context, $1.2 billion in R&D is about $8 million a day in research and development that we are putting back into the business in order to make sure that you have the innovations that you need. And me, I am just a farm kid from southwestern Ontario. As Jill said, I spend most of my days now, though, extolling the benefits of science and risk-based regulatory and policy environment so that Corteva can bring those products to the market and make sure that you have everything that you need. I'm going to be joined today by my panelists, and I'd like to invite them on stage now, if that's okay, who do much of the same from different vantage points in the industry. We're here to talk to you today about the policy outlook in Ottawa in 2024 from our different perspectives. So joining me on stage, and I'll give them all the opportunity to introduce themselves here momentarily, is our agriculture champion of choice in Ottawa, the Honourable Rob Black, chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Agriculture and Forestry. Beside him is esteemed colleague Gail McLaughlin, manager of Government and Industry Relations with the Canadian canola growers. I know that you guys don't really grow canola here in Manitoba, but she's going to tell you a little bit about it. And Pierre Patel, president of CropLife Canada, and in full disclosure, Corteva is a proud member of CropLife Canada, so just disclosing the conflict of interest there on this panel this morning. So I'm going to take a seat with this fantastic gang. I'm going to ask all of you, as I take a seat, we'll start with Senator Black, if that's okay, to introduce themselves, and then maybe we're a week out from the House of Commons returning. Todd alluded to that. There's some busy months in front of us, not to mention incessant rumors of a federal election, a new Liberal Party leader, an election south of the border that may or may not deliver a second Trump presidency, and that's just everything that's in front of us, let alone some of the things that are behind us in 2023 or the last few years, and we're going to do a little bit of talking about that this morning. What comes to mind is a 7-year battle on gene editing, and we're close to the finish line, hopefully in 2024 on that. About 2 years on Bill C-234 now through the Agriculture Carbon Alliance, and then, of course, the excellent work that Senator Black is doing on his soil health study at the Senate. And so, panelists, short introduction, who you are, what you do, and maybe 1 or 2 priorities heading into the fall session, this session in 2024.
There we go. Thanks very much for Andrea for the introduction. My name's Rob Black. I'm from Ontario. I live just north of Guelph, Ontario. I grew up on a farm. Agricultural background, that's what I do. That's what I've done for my entire life. 15 years with the provincial government and then 18 years with not-for-profit organizations in Ontario until I was appointed almost 6 years ago now, 1 month short of 6 years to the Senate of Canada. And it's an honor and a privilege to represent you folks in the Senate of Canada. Agriculture is what I know and what I know best, and so that's what I've done since I arrived there. No one has mentioned it this morning, and I want to just tell you that yesterday, agriculture had a big hit in a big win in the Senate of Canada when Todd, your past president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Mary Robinson, was appointed to the Senate of Canada. She'll be a tremendous addition to the Senate and to agriculture. A couple of my priorities, I want to see the soil study finished up, and I'll talk about that a little later. And I always stand up and talk about agriculture in the Senate. 6 years ago, agriculture wasn't talked about often, and because of some of the work that I've done and others in the Senate, I can tell you that agriculture is talked about weekly, if not almost daily, especially in the last 2 or 3 months. That's enough for me.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name's Gail McLaughlin. I'm the Manager of Government and Industry Relations with the Canadian Canola Growers Association. So for those who don't know, CCGA, we advocate on the federal level on behalf of Canada's 43,000 canola farmers. We're governed by a 10-farmer board of directors that direct our policy from Ontario to BC. And we're also the largest administrator of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Advanced Payments Program. So our main office in Winnipeg deals with our advances, and then we have a satellite office, which is what I work out of in Ottawa, with our Vice President, Government Relations, to advocate on behalf of canola farmers at the federal level. I've been in advocacy and government relations for 8 years, and I previously worked under the Harper government for a minister and in Alberta and Toronto member of Parliament. And in terms of what's coming up this year, I think we all need to buckle up. It's going to be quite the time. Certainly 234, CCGA has been heavily involved with advocating for that bill. CCGA, we co-chair the Agriculture Carbon Alliance, which is an alliance of 16 national farm organizations cross commodity, from grains, supply managed groups, CFA, all coming together to advocate on agri-environmental policy. And one bill in particular that we've been following, of course, is 234 right from the get-go. And so that bill has really had a lot of dynamic twists and turns to it, especially for what we call a private member's bill, which is a bill that is not a government-sponsored bill. And so we're expecting that to come up in this first session coming back, as Andrea mentioned, that the House comes back in a week, and so we're going to be following that very closely. There's also a lot of positive developments as well. Certainly environmental policy is going to continue to be a priority for this government. There's lots of different things going on there, but the budget coming up this spring as well, and there's going to be some important transportation policy things potentially in there as well that will benefit farmers. So, and right to repair, there's also some initiatives on that front as well. So there's a lot of broad policy areas that we're kind of covering and that could make some developments this spring.
Great. Well, thank you. Like Andrea said, my name is Pierre Patel. I'm the other Pierre P. from Ottawa. Happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Not that anyone can say no to Brenna when she asks you to appear somewhere, but I'm very, very happy to be here. CropLife Canada is the association that represents the companies that provide the seed technology and the crop protection products, companies like Corteva and many of their competitors that I won't name because it's a Corteva-sponsored panel. But we're really there in Ottawa to advocate for rules and policies that enable companies like theirs to bring their technologies to Canada and to make sure that Canada is a place where they want to invest, where our farmers get access to those newest and best crop protection products and seed innovations at the same time as our competitors around the world, or even faster. My personal background, didn't grow up on a farm, military background, so kind of moved around a lot, but got my first taste of agriculture really in university, at the University of Guelph, and kind of sucked me in. And and I've worked in an agriculture-related field ever since. And so I often tell people once you get pulled into the agriculture vortex, you don't really leave again, even if you're not from agriculture. So very happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Super. Thanks, everyone. So I think what's really important to remember, ultimately, we've all gone through this first set of introductions on what we do, but it's really, truly, we're doing it on the behalf of the Canadian farmer. And I think that it's really important for all of us to come back to that, that we don't get to do what we do if you don't get to run a successful business and continue to do the farm work that you love. And so one of the groups that I think has done a tremendous job in the last few years of representing the voice of the farmer has been the Agriculture Carbon Alliance. And so I'd love, Gail, if you could spend a couple of minutes talking to us about what the Ag Carbon Alliance is doing, why it came together, and why it's been such a successful coalition in the last few years.
Sure, thanks. We started in about 2022, so our Vice President Dave Carey approached Scott Ross from Canadian Federation of Agriculture and said, hey, I think this government elected in 2015 on a platform to do more to combat climate change, and so there's been an increased focus in that area in Ottawa. Can we get national farm groups together to be on the same page on this? And so from there it kind of started, and we were able to again get national organizations from across commodities to come together. And one of the first topics was, carbon pricing, of course. This government did enact that. And so we saw that there was a gap. Certainly there's been an exemption for diesel and gas on farm, but propane and natural gas was not. And so that we saw an opportunity there that can be fixed for farmers, recognizing that it does cost you a lot of money. And so we recognize that in previous parliaments there were similar bills that tried to get passed. There was one in the Senate as well as in the House of Commons. And so we took the opportunity to approach different members of parliament to see if they were willing to sponsor, and we found a rural Ontario MP, Ben Lobb, that was able to sponsor the bill, a Conservative member of parliament. And so from there, we've just been supporting it from the get-go. And, again, typically private members' bills don't get politicized, but of course this time we've kind of seen that happening, and normally they don't go back to the House of Commons and whatnot. So it's been some interesting dynamics, but we've been there every step of the way to encourage a bill to go through as quickly as possible. And of course, we want it as quickly as possible too, given that it is a minority government, and so an election could come at any time, and if that happens, the bill is gone. It would have to be reintroduced again. And of course, I know the Conservatives have said that they're going to axe the tax, but there's no guarantee that they could get back in government, or we might have this government until 2025 as well. And so we want to make sure that this bill is passed as soon as possible.
Super, thanks, Gail. And so Senator Black, you had a particular vantage point as Bill C-234 was going through the parliamentary process, caught a couple of snags in the Senate, in your chamber.
Couple.
And so as you feel comfortable, do you mind telling us a little bit about what happened? Walk us through what it was like to be in the Senate as Bill C-234 was going through in the fall.
Sure, thanks very much. And I have some notes just so I get it right. But certainly over the fall sitting, C-234 was a significant topic. It came to the Senate just at a time when we also heard the campaign Axe the Tax, and we also heard about the Atlantic Heat Pump Affordability Program. It came in the spring, but we really got down to the debate in the fall at that time. So I think the bill and those other two items just caused it to be fully politicized, as you said, Gail. But in the bill was referred to the Ag Committee, and in the Ag Committee we have 8 or 9 individuals that come to the committee meetings regularly, and I will share with you that for the entire time that the C-234 was discussed, it was fully stocked with folks who wanted to vote against 234. So those folks that were interested in doing away with the bill or changing it fully filled the rest of the committee chairs. Anyways, in the committee, it was amended, or there was an amendment that was put forward, and it passed in committee. And so then we had to take it back to the Senate, and at the Senate, as a chair, it's a tough thing to do, but I recommended that the Senate vote down our report, because if it was voted down, it would go back to the original bill. They did vote it down. It was 44 to 26 or 38 to 26 or something like that. And then the real debate on a third reading took place. And there was a motion to, an amendment to the bill that took out the barn heating and heating of greenhouses, and that passed. It was 38 to 36 or something like that. And then there were two other motions that were put forward, and they were fully debated and defeated. One was actually passed, but so there were two amendments that we ended up voting on. And once the bill was fully debated, my goal was to get it back to the House, to the House of Commons. We call it the other place, back to the other place for them to look at it again. And my hope, our hope is that the House of Commons can make changes and put it back to the way it was. That's where it is. Who knows? I know there's a lot of folks in the House of Commons that are for the bill as it stood, and we'll hope to see what happens in the coming weeks.
Fantastic, thanks. We will not be taking any bets on Bill C-234 this morning. But I want to turn to Pierre now, because one of the other items in Ottawa that has recently been heavily politicized or had seen an increase in politicization has been the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, or the PMRA, and that goes back a couple of years now. Can you tell us a little bit, give us a peer into what's happening at the PMRA, why the politicization, and what we can expect out of the PMRA in 2024?
Yeah, sure. And I think, you know, a producer in Manitoba, what's happening at a regulatory agency in Ottawa may seem like a distant thing that doesn't really impact your business, but there's a direct line, right? Because if those regulations aren't being handled properly and the products aren't coming to market, when you do have pest problems, you'll be at a disadvantage. Your competitors in the US will have tools that you don't have, and you'll constantly fall behind. So that's really the why we do it. The what, this really came about in 2021, right before the last election. There was some noise around glyphosate, specifically around residues of glyphosate in food, and it got quite a bit of media attention in Quebec, and really that prompted the government at the time to say, well, we're gonna do a bunch of work at PMRA. We're gonna modernize. We're gonna create a transformation team. We're going to create a science panel. And they made all these promises before the election. And our hope was that after the election, they would kind of water some of that down and get back to reality. But they didn't. And every single one of those sort of announcements were then followed through on. And it's been 2 years of really an odd period, really looking at every part of the regulations and legislation and activist groups who are not aligned with most of us in this room, really trying to drive the bus on what the future of pesticide regulation should look like in Canada. And I'll tell you, it's been a battle. We've had we've had to add staff. We've had some of our staff just almost demoralized, because instead of trying to look for the future and improving the system, we're trying to keep at least what we had. And so that's been the sort of so it was politically driven again, back to 234, and the legacy of this is now you've got NGOs who are expecting big changes. They feel they've got a seat at the table. They've got their elbows out, and they're trying every tactic in the book, from accusing us of having too much influence, which is almost laughable, right? But yeah, that we're basically driving the regulatory agencies, and so it's been a tumultuous couple of years. But on the bright side, we certainly feel that there is starting to be a little more appreciation and a recognition of why those regs are in place, why the PMRA did the things they did. So it took a while, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah. Super. I might use this opportunity then to segue into some good things that are happening, right? And I'll use that last comment from you, Pierre, to say, you know, oftentimes it can be pretty easy to think about the things that we're frustrated with, right? There's no shortage of fires in Ottawa. There's no shortage of bad news. That's what drives the city. But we're really lucky in Canada to have some pretty fantastic regulatory agencies and elected officials and public policy staff. And certainly as a regulated party, Corteva would turn to Canada as a place that has historically been truly predictable and transparent and science-based, and we're one of the few left in the world, and I think it's really important to remember that and be grateful for it. That's not to say we can't seek improvements, and our job is to seek those improvements. But I think, you know, just a moment to pause and reflect on that and be grateful for that and, yeah, do the work to protect and defend it. Good news. Senator Black, you've been working for a couple of years now on a soil health study. And I think we can all get behind the concept of soil health. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that's going, what you might need from folks in this room going into 2024 as you seek to wrap it up?
Thanks very much. The soil health study, the order of reference was granted in the Senate chamber in the spring of 2022, and we started the study in the fall. And to date, we've heard from 136 witnesses in our committee meetings, plus we've traveled across the country and around the world, hearing from experts and folks that are doing good stuff with respect to soil health. And we've had 28 committee meetings to date. I expect we'll be wrapping it up by the end of February, then the report will be written. You can anticipate hearing about that report and seeing that report in June of this year, if all things go according to plan. And I will hope from you then that you'll take a look at that study and get it out there and help to share it, the recommendations that we'll put forward. This is a second Senate soil study. The first one was completed by Senator Herbert Sparrow from Saskatchewan. It was completed in 1984. To this date, 157 years later, from the start of Canada, the Senate of Canada, it's the most requested Senate report ever to this date. And so my hope is that this second study will be equally as important, with a number of recommendations that governments at all levels will be wanting to look at. The first report was directed at the federal government. This one, obviously, Senate reports are directed at the federal government, but I expect there'll be recommendations that will speak to and reach both provincial and municipal governments as well. So all three levels of government, I hope it will resonate with them.
Super. Yes, round of applause. 40 years later.
40 years later, exactly.
With CAP, celebrating
With
CAP. We timed it like that. The senator did
Exactly.
that, actually. That's a
We'll
little
likely
gift
put
to
your logo on it, CAP.
Another piece of good news taking place hopefully in 2024, a project that is long overdue to be wrapped up, is some policy guidance updated around plants with novel traits. And that's a fancy way of saying plant breeding techniques and modernized plant breeding techniques, and specifically gene editing. And Corteva is partial to that, of course, as one of the largest seed producers in the world, but we're particularly excited about this. If and when it all gets settled, it will put Canada as the most innovative, investment-friendly jurisdiction in the world for novel plant breeding techniques. That is something to be celebrated and something to embrace. But we're not quite finished. So I'd like to turn it to Pierre, again, to tell us a little bit about how do we get to the finish line. It's been 7 years of trying to get this new modernized policy guidance. Why did it take 7 years? And then how do we get to the finish line?
People here are going to think nothing gets done in Ottawa. Well, you're partly right.
Hey now.
We were trying to be proactive 7 years ago before these techniques were even really commercialized. It was just a notion, and we knew we needed to modernize the regulatory system to enable those. So I remember the first meeting. We went to government, and they're kind of looking at us. Well, are your members bringing those products like soon? And we're like, no, and they were looking at us like, well, why are we here? And it took a few years just to get them to appreciate the need to look at the system, and so it's in earnest, it's really been the last 3 or 4 years that we've been working with the government on the regulatory policy. So just quickly, in Canada, we look at the food, we look at the environment, and we look at the feed elements of seed. Those are run by 3 different groups in government, very efficient. And we've got the food part done with Health Canada, we've got the environment part done with CFIA, and we've got the feed part consulted on, and we're waiting for that last policy direction, is what Andrea was referring to. So once that's done, and if it remains unchanged, which we think it will, Canada will have probably the best, the clearest, the most transparent, most predictable and science-based approach to gene editing and new breeding techniques in anywhere in the world. And so what I was talking about, trying to position Canada to be that top market, this will certainly help. On the seed side, small companies, large companies, public breeders will all see a very clear pathway to using that technique to innovate seed technology. And the difference between gene editing and GM technology is really the cost and speed. The reason why most of the genetically modified crops are large acre, big companies is because it's hundreds of millions of dollars to get those technologies through the regulatory system. Gene editing can be done at a fraction of the cost and much quicker. So you've got now opportunities for small companies, universities to develop field-specific, sort of sector-specific crops very quickly and very efficiently. So we're very excited about that opportunity. And I think for the future of agriculture, this could be a transformative phase like no-till was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. We think it's that significant, that what the future holds with gene editing. So those of you in university and in school, pay attention to that technology and try to get involved in that. You're getting in on the early part of that curve, and there's lots of career opportunity in that space for sure. So.
Thanks, Pierre. I think one of the other elements of what has led to the success of our advocacy around new guidance for gene editing in plants with novel traits is the way we've been able to tie the technologies to something that is so critically important to officials in Ottawa and to all of us in this room and on this stage as well, but in a real visceral way in Ottawa, and that is the theme of sustainability. And so we've been able to demonstrate the way that this technology will help drive sustainability outcomes across Canadian agriculture. Think about frost-tolerant canola, drought-tolerant corn, short-stature corn, or just 3 examples off the top of my head of crops that we could probably commercialize at a fairly faster pace that's going to develop sustainability and productivity outcomes on your farm. So sustainability is a key theme in Ottawa. One of the efforts that has been underway in Ottawa over the last few years has been the Sustainable Ag Strategy out of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. There's a tactic that is often used in Ottawa, gang, when they don't really want you to know what's going on, is they'll table something, or they'll publish something on like a Friday before a long weekend, or everybody's at the cottage, nobody's reading a report out of the CFIA, and that's what happened in December over Christmas break. The Federal Ag Department tabled a What We Heard report on the Sustainable Agriculture Strategy. This after months of consultations and working groups and lots of effort from the industry to talk about what sustainable agriculture would look like and could look like going forward. So I'd love if maybe each one of the panelists could maybe talk, and we'll start with Gail if that's okay. Talk about, where do we go now? We have the What We Heard report on Sustainable Ag Strategy. What's going to happen in 2024 around the Sustainable Ag Strategy, do we think, if we had a crystal ball?
Sure. Yeah. I guess this is coming from the Minister of Agriculture's mandate letter. So each minister receives, kind of a to-do list from the Prime Minister about, what they hope to accomplish in their mandate. And so the Minister of Agriculture, at the time it was Minister Bebeau, had a request from the Prime Minister to develop, a strategy. And so that's underway. There is an advisory committee. So Canadian Canola Growers Association and other other groups are on that keyword is advisory committee on this. And so they're basically, the strategy is looking to improve the environmental performance of the sector, but also doing it in a way that makes sure that we are still competitive and that farms are still doing well, and we're still able to export our product and feed Canada and the world. And so there is ongoing discussions about what that's going to look like, and they're hoping to release it in 2024. And I would just say, from canola's standpoint as well, given 90% of what we grow here in Canada is exported, we see a lot of growth opportunities in North America in particular for biofuel. We're looking to grow more, of course, sustainably through products that Pierre's members make as well, but looking to make sure that we remain competitive. And so a constant theme I would say that we are always telling government is, farmers are business people at the end of the day. We need to make money. We have a responsibility to feed Canada and the world, and so policies need to enable farmers and not, hinder their performance. And you guys know what's best in terms of what to grow on your farm and how to grow it. So we're always emphasizing to government that you need to be enablers and not necessarily, tell farmers what to do. And so we're having those ongoing conversations, and then just recognizing that every farm is different, every region of Canada is different, and there's not a one-size-fits-all to this, and that we need to be working together. And I will emphasize too, Andrea, just to kind of give you a scope of the landscape in Ottawa, I think this might be a good illustration. So CCGA, we normally are among the top, lobby organizations in terms of meetings with officials. So you can look at the lobby commissioner's website, and you'll see, as it's a transparent process that the Harper government made to see what organizations are meeting with government. And so CCGA, normally we meet a lot with parliamentarians, and so we do about 240 meetings a year, and we're typically considered, that's a lot of meetings. But then you also have in the registry about 30,000 also registered meetings. So CCGA as one organization does 240, total over 30,000 a year. So I illustrate that to tell you that there is a wide landscape of different sectors looking to speak with the same 338 members of parliament, 105 senators, central agencies such as Finance Canada. And so I say that to illustrate that we in agriculture really need to work together and provide a common voice. And I think C234 is an example of that we in agriculture have been able to present to government a common ask, because if we're fragmented in any way, it gives a chance for government to either not move forward on what we want to do, or if there's another voice that is more coordinated, that they would get the attention of government. So just want to emphasize that as well, and that's going to be important for environmental policy going forward, that we're all asking government for the same things and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. Senator Black, that's often the lesson you give to us when we meet with you, right? Which is sing from the same song sheet, come with one voice. What else do you need from us as a sector?
Thanks. We need to hear that one voice, and I'll just reiterate that. Pierre talked about the one line, the direct line to this group here and individuals. If you've got something that you think I should know about, or my colleagues, don't hesitate to let us know. I can't stand up and ask the government representative in the Senate if I don't know about your issue. It may not be top of mind right now, but it might be something that I want to raise next week or next month. So that's what we need from you and organizations. And I will meet with every ag organization that knocks on my door, and I have to date. I came in with 3 priorities: agriculture, rural, and youth. And those are the groups that I talk to. Specifically, but I also hear from the other sides of many things. You talked about C234 bringing people together, the industry together. I'll just mention that C282 is divisive in nature, and we might talk about that later or offline. But 282, certainly there are 2 camps in agriculture, and that's not good for for your industry. I'd like to say our industry. For our industry, we need to speak with one voice.
Thank you. So we talked about soil health, we talked about C234, we've talked about sustainability. Gail, you had a long list of other files taking place. Could we do maybe a rapid fire, a pressing challenge that you see for your members or for the Canadian agriculture sector, let's say in the next 90 days?
I might switch it to more of an opportunity on the
that.
canola side, if that's okay. Certainly on the biofuel front, governments around the world are looking to lower their emissions, particularly in the transportation sector. And biofuel canola is a feedstock in biofuel, and so we're seeing, you may have heard, there's over $2 billion worth of investments here in Canada for new or expanded processing plants. And really, I think the expectation largely is that there might be some market shift in terms of where our product goes and what it gets used for. And, for example, canola biofuel would do about 1.8 million tons in the North American biofuel market, and that could expand to over 6 by 2030. So we're seeing an increased demand, particularly in the United States as well. So, and that can be a benefit for farmers as well to help hedge against, the international volatility that our canola farmers face. I think about China in 2019 and shutting down that market and what that had done to our sector. And so having kind of more of an integrated North American biofuel market would be a benefit and potentially a premium for canola as well. So on the canola front, we're seeing some really positive opportunity there for growth in our sector and demand for your product as well.
Pierre?
Yeah, I might extend your 90 days to 6 months, because 90 days in Ottawa is like this.
Yes.
But certainly in the next 6 months, I hope that we can finalize that gene editing policy and have that up and running, and then start to not only invite those innovations in Canada, but start to talk to other countries around the world about that program and get them, because obviously trade is still going to be an issue. So the more countries we can have aligned with our approach, the easier it will be to export that 90% of the canola and other crops. So that's something that we're quite excited about. I think the PMRA stuff that I talked about, that whole agenda, the transformation agenda, is coming to some sort of an inflection point. There is a meeting in a couple of weeks to talk about how they operationalize some of the transformation. So I think what I'm hoping it is a signal that official thing is going to end and become more of an operational sort of process improvement thing, which it now should be. So that would be an excellent development. And I think just maybe a little higher level, just the way, I mean, we talked a lot about different initiatives, but I think one thing I haven't mentioned is the working together, right? So I also chair the Canada Grains Council right now for the next year and a half, and that brings together the whole grain value chain. And what I've seen, even just on some of these particular issues, on the gene editing file, for example, we worked very closely with CFA, with Grains Council, with Canola Council, canola growers, all these groups working together, delivering that one message so that government couldn't say, well, this part of ag is asking for this and you guys are asking for that. And so I think that is an important message to leave everybody here, is that get involved in CAP and pay attention to what your provincial association's doing, because they're connected to the national group, and it's important work. And I think the other thing is, it's one thing for me to go meet with an MP or a senator, but I'm a lobbyist, right? And so is Gail and her boss, and it's very different when you have an actual producer who can deliver the same message, but talk about, and on my farm, this is what it means, and on my farm. And I've seen so many effective meetings that cut right to the chase and seen that sort of value much more quickly when it's a farmer delivering the message. So again, young people in here, get involved. It is important work, and it's quite rewarding too.
So Pierre has just hit on something very important, and we have 2 responses on stage. So we'll start with Senator Black and then over to Gail.
Thanks, and you're wanted over there. Thanks. I agree. When Pierre comes in, if he brings in his members, I'm not really talking to Pierre. I'm talking to the members, and the same with national organizations or provincial organizations. The message comes through best when it's the on the ground person. You can get them in the door, and you both do that very well. But when I'm sitting around the table, I like to hear from them. And so the meetings that I find most rewarding and most useful are more than just 1 or 2, yourself and an office colleague. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and just mention too, like this is absolutely a team effort, and I know we talk about 2, 3, 4 a lot, but I think if we get this across the finish line, this will be such an excellent example of ag farm groups working together. Particularly, I think when it was in the House, we had Elizabeth May vote for this bill, the NDP, obviously the Conservatives on board, and so I think we were able to get that multi-party support because we've had all agriculture championing behind it. And I will say too, this isn't just about us having meetings. We do have a Show Your Receipts campaign, the Agriculture Carbon Alliance. This is your opportunity to help us help you. We need to provide more hard numbers about the costs of the carbon tax on your farm for propane and natural gas. So you go to agcarbonalliance.ca, you can upload your bill or whatever you feel comfortable sharing. We're able to kind of aggregate that and come back to parliamentarians and showcase and kind of counter some of the narrative in Ottawa that this is an insignificant amount, and so we want to be able to provide numbers to counter that. So this is an opportunity for all of us to work together to champion something and provide success for farmers.
Super. Huge. So on that empowering note, I hope you're all feeling empowered about the role and the voice that you have and that we encourage you to use, because we certainly need it. I think we do a good job, right, every day. We try our very best, but we can't do it without you. There's 7 minutes left in this panel. I've just been told that we have the opportunity to go to 1 or 2 questions in the crowd. We will be here for the remainder of the morning. Please feel free to come up to us and ask any outstanding questions, but I'm going to pass my mic now to Colin here in Brenna, and so if there's 1 or 2 questions, we're happy to take those.
Make sure you introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm supposed to introduce myself, do I have to? Okay, Butch Harder, farm at Low Farm. One of the issues, and to the best of my knowledge, it's only the Manitoba canola growers that has really paid attention to this, is the merger between Viterra and Bunge. I see this as a very dangerous trend. Now, we don't have things going for us anyway that we get any public input or information. We used to have the prairie pools would report back to us. The wheat board would report back to us. The larger companies, as these mergers continue, they make money whether the price of grain is low or high, and we have no public input. We have no inclination on what it is there, and nobody seems to think it is a problem. And again, it is the canola growers who are primarily a research organization, and they have brought this to the attention. Now, it may be in the resolutions. CAP has said, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely nothing about it. Not that I've heard. And so I'm a little disappointed in that. I see that as a major problem. We want to have a monopoly in this grain business. Farmers told me that many years ago on this side of the Riding Mountain that we will have eventually a monopoly, and we are very concerned who will control it. And what is government doing about it? I think absolutely nothing. When the prairie pools wanted to merge many years ago, I was part of it. Oh, no, you can't do that. I was a cooperative. But now, not a problem. Just do it. And that's a far bigger issue than all this tweaking with this and tweaking with that and who can haul what and what. So I think it's a serious issue, and I'm very surprised that nobody pays any attention to it.
Thank you for that question and the comments. I think that ultimately hits at a question of competitiveness and competition, right? And so I don't know who from the panel wants to talk a little bit about the work that we do to encourage competition and make sure that Canada is a competitive place to do business.
Sure. I know that, when these mergers happen, the federal government does look into it to ensure that it is done in a competitive manner. And so I know that, they have reached out to farm groups to ask, for their opinion and the consequences of this. And I know in particular in Manitoba that this merger is of particular importance, and obviously less options for farmers in terms of where to, what companies to ship to and whatnot. So that is underway. And then the government is also proposing to look into the Competition Act as well and the merger reviews and seeing if there's improvements there. So I know at CCGA at the national level, we've seen that, and we're hoping to engage in that process once it goes forward. So certainly recognize that there is kind of being more consolidation, and I think it's just a matter of what can the federal government do to potentially improve that process, and we'll be involved in it.
I guess I would encourage you to raise it with your members of parliament. You know, that's where the departments lie with your members of parliament, especially the government side of things. So at the Senate, we can elevate and amplify the issue, but I can't do anything about it. I can amplify that issue, but it's your members of parliament that really, that's where it sticks.
David Rourke from District 1, farmer in southwestern Manitoba. I appreciate what the crop life companies have done for us. We grow more with less, and we keep evolving. And you keep coming up with some better and better products, but we keep doing the same thing over and over in canola. We put an insecticide on our seed. When that doesn't work, we spray it 1 or 2 times with insecticide. We've done the same thing for 40 or 50 years now. And I talked to one of the CEOs, one of the large companies, and he says, well, have you tried our newest product? And I said, yeah, and it works pretty good. He wasn't sure that he could get another new product when that one wears out and becomes resistant. So I suggested maybe that we should put a repellent on our expensive GMO or gene-edited seed, and sow 5 or 10 or 15 pounds of non-GMO canola and not kill the predators all the time. So I guess the point is that we need other options, not just what the life sciences companies can bring up, because you probably still can make pretty good money selling an expensive repellent on that, but we need to rely on some of those natural systems. And in England, where they don't have neonics and the canola acres have dropped, they are starting to see spider webs over their whole fields on zero-till wheat, where the canola is coming up without the problem of canola. So we need lots of different answers.
Yeah, actually, and I appreciate that question, because if you look at some of the investments, never mind the small companies that are part of crop life as well, but even with some of the majors, some of the investments they've made over the past 5 years in biological companies, startups, is billions of dollars at it. So they're not just throwing that money out there for nothing. They do see a future for biologicals, biopesticides as part of that mix, so that farmers have more solutions along the way. So that's definitely one area that there's been significant investment. I think crop technology, gene editing, will also help in that, because now we're getting much more precise in the genome of that plant, and maybe being able to breed in some of that resistance to some of those pests right in at the crop level. And then lastly, I think with insecticides, and the reason there's so few new solutions is the regulatory environment just keeps getting more and more difficult. And if you look at the pipeline of new active ingredients for insecticides in particular, it has gone down to, it's, at a very steep slope down towards zero. So we've got to find a way to make sure that the products that we do have stay on the market for as long as possible, and rotate in other products, because we're not going to have, there's not a huge wave of new insecticides coming to save the day.
Yeah, thank you. And I think other terms that come to mind, I'll use the opportunity to talk a little bit about Corteva, but other terms that come to mind in our advocacy work are integrated pest management approaches, right? We absolutely talk about resistance management. It's critical. CropLife runs an important campaign related to resistance management. So you're right, it takes all the tools in the toolbox in order for you to be able to do what you do. And appreciate that question. Thank you. We are over time, but Senator Black whispered in my ear and said, Andrew, I really want to talk about what keeps me up at night, and I can't not give that to you. So we're going to wrap it up with what keeps Senator Black up at night.
Thanks very much. I came with the rural perspective, and the rural-urban divide bothers me greatly, and that keeps me up at night. And under that, we can talk about connectivity and broadband, and internet services. The other piece is food security, or in fact, food insecurity. We're being asked to feed Canada and the world, and then it leads into my third thing that keeps me up at night, is land use planning, and which is a provincial jurisdiction. But I think we need federal policies that help to protect agriculture land across this country. It is a provincial jurisdiction, but if we don't have the land, we're not going to be able to feed our own country, let alone the world. And that's what keeps me up at night. It hit home last April the 19th when the provincial government signed an order that allowed Centre Wellington to grow by 1,000 acres. 440 acres of that was right next to me. I'm 4 miles out of Fergus, and that 440 acres came right up almost to my property line. And I was able to see Fergus from my bedroom window. That bothered me greatly. It has since been walked back, but that was because of the work that folks, farmers, producers, people in Ontario did to walk that back with the provincial government. Land use planning keeps me up at night. Not my real issue, but it has to be, I think, our issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. With that, I think it is time for coffee. We will be around if you have any additional questions for us, but thanks. A round of applause for the panelists here. And back over to Jill.